Welcome to True Tears Stories. Please like this video and subscribe to True Tears Stories. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Jonah didn't notice she was gone at first. The apartment was always quiet in the morning. Mia liked to sleep late, and he usually left before she stirred. But that Monday, he had called in sick, something he almost never did. He wanted to surprise her with breakfast, take a walk, talk about things they hadn't made time for in months. He padded through the apartment in his socks, coffee brewing, sunlight inching across the hardwood floors. Her purse wasn't on the table, no keys in the dish. The ring box, empty, sat exactly where it didn't belong, dead center on the kitchen counter. At first, his stomach dropped, like he'd forgotten something important. He called her name, gently at first. No answer. He opened the bedroom door, still made. Her closet looked thinner. He checked the drawer with their paperwork. Half of it was gone, and then he noticed the bank app on his phone, still open from last night, refreshed with a new, crushing balance. $13.27. His checking account, once padded and planned, had been drained. The credit card limits were maxed, the car title transfer pending. He blinked, looked again. No mistake. She had taken everything. His breath tightened, shallow and fast. He pressed his palm to the edge of the counter, grounding himself. His phone buzzed again. 2 notifications from his business account. Withdrawals. A name, hers, on both. The apartment didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt hollow, like something had been removed not just from the space, but from him. He didn't call her. Instead, he sat at the table and stared at the ring box. Not with rage, not yet. It was too early for that. Right now, it was just confusion. Cold and sharp, and quietly humiliating. By noon, the landlord called. "Jonah, I hate to do this, but the rent payment bounced again." Jonah closed his eyes. "I understand. I'll take care of it." He didn't know how, not yet. He checked her social media, deactivated, her number, disconnected. It was like she'd rehearsed her disappearance down to the timestamp. Clean exit. No mess left behind, unless you counted him. That night, he didn't sleep. He paced the apartment, checked old receipts, account logins, emails. He discovered her name had been added to a credit card without his approval. She'd ordered clothes, electronics, even booked flights months ago. He hadn't noticed. He'd trusted her, and trust, he now realized, had been the most expensive thing he'd ever given. He ordered takeout with his last 20, ate it on the floor, back against the wall, surrounded by boxes of things she hadn't thought worth taking. That stung more than what she had taken. The car, the cash, the cards. Those could be replaced. What she'd really stolen was the version of him that believed love was a safe place. But in the quiet, amid the dust she'd left behind, something else started to grow. Not anger, not yet, but the first spark of something like clarity. He didn't tell anyone, not at first. Jonah moved through the next week like a ghost in his own life. He avoided the mirror, ignored calls from friends, and made excuses at work. His boss noticed, of course. "You look like you haven't slept in a month," she said gently. "I'm just working through some things." She nodded, but he could tell she wanted to ask more. Jonah didn't want to explain how he'd handed over his life to someone who had disappeared with it. Instead, he focused on what he could still control. He opened a new bank account, changed passwords, locked down the business, even though the few clients he had were drifting. Reputation meant everything in his industry, and Mia had siphoned enough from their shared consulting firm to raise flags he couldn't wave away overnight. His pride kept him from asking for help. He wasn't raised that way. His father used to say, "Men handle their losses in silence. You don't let the world see the cracks." But the cracks were there. Too many to patch at once. By the second week, Jonah sold the TV, the watch Mia had gifted him last Christmas, and his grandfather's guitar. Each sale hurt, but he told himself it was temporary, that something stronger was waiting on the other side of this collapse. He remembered her words during one of their last arguments. She'd stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You're embarrassing, Jonah. You act like potential is enough. People don't follow good hearts. They follow power." He hadn't responded then, didn't know how. But now, those words echoed differently. They didn't sting the way they did before. They started to shape something inside him, a new voice, one that whispered, "Maybe she did you a favor." He started waking earlier, running before sunrise, rebuilding the company site from scratch, using skills he hadn't used in years because she had always insisted on outsourcing. Within 3 weeks, he landed a new client, small contract, but enough to breathe again. Then another. Momentum came slowly, like light creeping through blackout curtains. But once it started, he didn't want it to stop. He worked 12-hour days, not to prove anything to Mia. She was gone. This was about reclaiming something he'd lost long before she left: himself. Late one night, he sat in front of his laptop, sipping cheap wine from a chipped mug, and noticed a name in his email inbox. Tessa, Mia's mother. He hesitated, then clicked. "Jonah, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. For what it's worth, I always admired your strength. If you ever need anything, even just someone to talk to, you can reach out." T. It undid him in a quiet way. He leaned back in his chair, eyes burning. Mia's mother had always been gracious, gentle in ways her daughter never quite understood. He'd once fixed her leaky faucet while Mia scrolled through her phone, annoyed that they were visiting her mother at all. Now, here she was, extending kindness while her daughter vanished into silence. He didn't reply, but he reread it 3 times. He thought about deleting the ring box, too. It was still in the drawer, tucked behind some tax paperwork he hadn't opened. But something stopped him. Not sentiment. It just wasn't time yet. That night, he lay awake in bed, not anxious, just quiet. Something inside had shifted. He realized he wasn't waiting for her to come back anymore. He wasn't even angry. He was ready for what came next. Jonah didn't notice the car at first. It had been parked across the street for 3 days straight. Silver, sleek, expensive. Not unusual in the neighborhood, but something about it tugged at him. Maybe it was the way it never moved, or the way the man inside always sat too still, like he wasn't just waiting, he was watching. Jonah didn't confront him. He didn't need to. By the time the 4th day rolled around, the car was gone. In its place, a business card had been slid into the front door frame. black with embossed silver letters. Thomas V. Gray, Gray Financial Holdings. Jonah frowned. He'd heard the name, one of those heavy hitters in the city's private equity world, the kind of man who never called first, who summoned. Still, curiosity made him flip the card over. There was a handwritten note. Jonah, I believe we should talk. You've earned my attention. TVG. No phone number, no email, just a name and a message. Jonah almost threw it out. Almost. But something in those words pulled at him. Not the flattery, the implication. The following day, Jonah walked into the building where Gray's firm occupied the top floor. The receptionist didn't ask who he was. She just said, "Mr. Gray is expecting you," and buzzed him through. The office was quiet, more art gallery than workplace. Walls of glass, neutral tones, minimalist design, a quiet kind of power. Gray stood when Jonah entered, older than Jonah expected, mid-60s, impeccably dressed, hands behind his back. "I like men who survive," he said simply. Jonah stayed standing. "You're not the first to notice." Gray gestured to a seat, then sat himself. "I knew, Mia." The words came with no apology, no hesitation, just fact. Jonah didn't flinch. A lot of men did. That made Gray smile, if only faintly. "She told me you were predictable. Safe. She said you'd never fight back." Jonah leaned forward. "She was half right." Gray's smile deepened. "She emptied my accounts before she vanished." A pause. Then, "She took you for love." "She took me for sport." Jonah didn't speak. He waited. "I want to offer you a contract," Gray said finally. 3 months. Fix the mess she left in one of my boutique subsidiaries. You do well. I make it permanent." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "And this isn't some test of ego?" Gray's gaze was cool, precise. "Oh, it is. But not yours, mine." Jonah thought of the long nights, the debt collectors, the apology email from Mia's mother. He thought of how he rebuilt his firm with no money, no backing, and no one but himself to answer to. He nodded once. "Send the documents." Weeks passed. The work was brutal, but Jonah didn't flinch. He overhauled teams, cut dead weight, spoke in boardrooms with people who once laughed when he entered, and now watched, as if his words might change the oxygen in the room. They respected him, not because he asked for it, but because he no longer needed it. One afternoon, he passed by a lobby where a familiar voice caught his ear. Laughter, sharp and airy. Mia. He froze behind the marble wall, hidden by the curve of the hallway. She looked different, expensive, hollow, laughing too loudly at something no one else was laughing at. He didn't step out, didn't confront her. He just watched and realized she didn't know he worked here. Didn't know he was the one keeping her ex-boss's empire upright. Didn't know that every meeting she'd been trying to secure this month had come through him first. Jonah walked away without a word. That night, he opened the drawer where the ring box still sat. He finally threw it out. Not in a rage. Not in sadness. Just with the same calm certainty he brought to every decision these days. He didn't need the closure. He was the closure. The rain came quietly, like a final punctuation mark on a sentence Jonah hadn't meant to write. He stood by the tall windows of his apartment, no longer cramped, no longer a reminder of what he lost, but of what he built. The city stretched beneath him, wet and blinking, alive in a way that once made him feel small. Now, it just looked different, like it had shifted around him. Or maybe he'd shifted inside it. His phone vibrated once on the counter. A message from the office. Not urgent. Below it, another text. Unknown number. I saw you. I wasn't sure it was you, but I think about you. Jonah stared at the message. He didn't respond. He didn't even finish reading it again. Mia's voice had long since been reduced to an echo, not in his ears, but in his reactions. There was a time when a message like that would have sent him spiraling, a time when he would have answered, if only to win. Now, he simply powered off the phone. Jonah's days had grown quieter, not empty, just intentional. He woke when he wanted to, read the paper, sometimes twice, went for walks, not because he had nowhere to go, but because the world was worth noticing again. People still called him lucky or clever, but he'd stopped explaining how survival was never about luck. It was about watching everything burn down and choosing to stay anyway, choosing to dig through the ash. One Thursday afternoon, as he left the office early, the new assistant, fresh out of business school, bright and a little too eager, caught up to him in the elevator. "Sir," she said, awkward and breathless, "I wanted to ask you something." Jonah turned, holding the door open. "Go ahead." "How did you know you were ready? To start again, I mean." The question sat between them for a moment. He didn't rush his answer. "I didn't," he said finally. "I just knew I was tired of waiting for someone to save me." The doors closed before she could respond. Later that week, Gray pulled him aside. "You know she's trying to get back in, don't you?" he asked, handing over a list of clients Mia had contacted. Jonah glanced at the paper, folded it neatly, placed it in the shredder. "I know." Gray looked at him differently after that, not with pity, not with concern, but with something like respect, the kind that didn't need words. That weekend, Jonah hosted a dinner for the leadership team. Nothing extravagant, just home-cooked meals and wine in mismatched glasses. They laughed loudly, too loudly, and no one wore suits. When they left, he stayed behind to clean. No housekeeper, no performance, just him and the life he built with his hands, not his ego. He paused at the sink, drying a wine glass slowly. The city lights danced on its surface. He wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at them, not even at himself. He was something rarer. He was free. He stepped out onto the balcony, barefoot, a mug of tea warming his palms as the cool breeze brushed against his face. From here, the skyline didn't look like it was towering over him anymore. It looked like it had made room for him. In the quiet hum of evening, Jonah didn't feel like a man who'd won. That word had always felt too sharp, too soaked in competition. He felt like someone who had endured, and in doing so, discovered the quiet strength of boundaries, of self-worth, of enough. He thought back to the day she left, the suitcase wheels scraping the hallway floor, the way she didn't look back. And then to the day he realized that her absence wasn't a hole in his life, but space. Space he could finally fill with things that fed him instead of drained him. For months, he had mistaken stillness for stagnation, silence for punishment, but he had needed both to hear himself again, to realize his voice had value even if it wasn't loud, even if it wasn't validated by someone else's approval. Jonah had always believed he needed someone beside him to make the story whole, But he'd learned that the real work, the messy, beautiful, deeply human work, was figuring out who you were when no one else was watching. He'd loved her, yes, and lost her. But he had also lost the version of himself that allowed that love to become a leash. And now, standing under a sky not asking anything of him, with no need to perform or prove, he breathed in the evening air. No bitterness, no desire for revenge. Just a deep, unwavering sense of peace. Not because everything turned out perfectly, but because he had.